So let's not have a debate about Islam and whether or not Islam is a religion of peace without talking about the facts to do with Islam. It's an absurd situation we're in, where nothing that anyone does whilst being Muslim is any responsibility of Islam's. Yet anything anyone does whilst being a Christian or a Jew is responsibility of all Christians, all Jews.
Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial debates around. Is Islam truly a religion of peace? You'll want to watch this one until the very end, as Douglas Murray masterfully dismantles the arguments of Muslim apologists trying to whitewash the harsh realities of Islamic doctrine and history. We'll be back to Douglas in a moment, but first, let's look at the motivation behind debates like this one. Why is there such resistance to having an open and honest discussion about Islam's core teachings and the extremism it has inspired throughout history? Could it be that speaking frankly about these issues is seen as politically incorrect in our society? Or is there something deeper at play, a fear of being branded an Islamophobe, or even facing retaliation from radicals? This hypocrisy and double standard from our cultural elites is both appalling and dangerous. Douglas exposes how they studiously avoid discussing Islam's deeply problematic scriptures and tenets that have fueled radicalism, terrorism, and human rights abuses. In this clip, he exposes the blatant double standard when it comes to scrutinizing different religions.
I imagine that if the motion we had here tonight was Christianity is a religion of peace, we get to the Q&A, perhaps even before, and somebody would say, if the other side were arguing for that, somebody would say, what about the Crusades? What about that? And then there'd be some other clever clogs who'd say, what about that Florida pastor the other week? That was a nasty business. That's Christianity for you. If we'd had tonight, Judaism is a religion of peace, the other side were trying to argue that. Sure as anything. There'd be people popping up in the hall tonight saying, oh, there's this bit in one of the Old Testament books, really, really bad. All sorts of massacres going on. Why don't you talk about that? There might even be people trying to say that, the argument that Judaism was a religion of peace couldn't be argued because people would say, look at what Israel is doing.
Well said, Douglas. The soft bigotry of low expectations when it comes to Islam is a disturbing trend we've seen play out time and again. The left-wing media and academic elite would never turn a blind eye to Christianity's violent chapters like the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisition. Yet, when it comes to Islam, they engage in obfuscation and deflection rather than honestly examining its troubling aspects. While imperfections of other faiths are fair game, Islam seems to operate under special rules, exempt from scrutiny over its most problematic aspects. The question is, why do we tiptoe around Islam while holding other religions fully accountable for their extremists? Next, Douglas cuts through the feel-good platitudes about Islam being a religion of peace by looking at its actual foundations and teachings.
Eminent scholars like Bernard Lewis, Ibn Waraq have made. Let's say Islam is a very, very complex thing. And the best way I can do this in the very short time I have is say you have three Islams. Islam 1, 2, and 3. Islam 1, the Quran and the life of Muhammad and the Hadith. Islam 2, the tradition of the Sharia. Islam 3, what Muslims do now.
Douglas breaks down Islam into three important frameworks: the Quran, Sharia law, and contemporary Muslim practices. Let's examine these categories more closely.
Eminent scholars like Bernard Lewis, Ibn Waraq have made. Let's say Islam is a very, very complex thing. And the best way I can do this in the very short time I have is say you have three Islams. Islam 1, 2, and 3. Islam 1, the Quran and the life of Muhammad and the Hadith. Islam 2, the tradition of the Sharia. Islam 3, what Muslims do now. The first of those things, Islam, the Quran and so on, is bad. It is bad. There is a lot of violence in it. And what's worse, the peaceful verses are superseded by the violent verses. The violent verses also, sadly, are more numerous in number. Then you've got the life of Muhammad. Again, a bad man. A very bad man, it has to be said. Not a great role model, if you look at it. Takes child brides, abuses a small girl, multiple wives, himself a warrior, himself a war criminal, himself beheads Jews. This, I would have thought, would be a signal of not great peacefulness.
As Douglas rightly points out, the core texts contain numerous violent verses that overshadow the peaceful ones. Surah 9, 5 from the Quran, for instance, is often cited by extremists to justify violence. And when the sacred months have passed, then kill the polytheists wherever you find them, and capture them and besiege them, and sit and wait for them at every place of ambush. This is an undeniable fact that absolutely demolished the narrative of Islam as a benign, tolerant faith. You simply cannot be a religion of peace while birthing such an ideology of conquest and subjugation. This verse, among others, has fueled debates about whether Islam inherently promotes violence. Murray argues that many of the Islamic prophet Muhammad's actions, including military campaigns, set problematic precedents for some of his followers. As time has passed, these interpretations have been used, sometimes heinously, by radical elements, as we shall discuss later on.
Then you've got the tradition of the Sharia. Again, not great peacefulness. Still no schools of Sharia that people in this hall.
Douglas is spot on here. The application of Sharia law in some Muslim-majority countries has led to practices that conflict severely with modern human rights standards. This tension underscores the broader issue of how Islamic practices should adapt, if at all, to contemporary values and human rights norms. For instance, severe punishments for apostasy and blasphemy remain in some countries that include the death penalty, and these practices contribute to the perception of Islam as being intolerant or violent. These practices raise serious concerns over modern values such as freedom of speech, which seem to have no room for existence at all in most Muslim-majority countries.
Thirdly, what Muslims do now, thankfully, there is some hope in that one. Because most Muslims, thank goodness, I almost said thank God, but old habits die hard. Most Muslims don't do what those texts say.
As Douglas rightfully points out, what Muslims do now primarily reflects individual interpretations, and that spectrum is wide. From moderate practices to extreme interpretations, Islam manifests in diverse ways.
Look, I wish that Zebra and Majid were the spokespeople of Islam.
Murray's plea here is evident. There's a desperate need for platforms where moderate and reformist Muslim voices can be heard louder than the extremists. Murray asserts that the louder, often radical voices disproportionately shape the global narrative about Islam, and the fact that the people who seem to be representative of Islam in the mainstream media are reluctant to even address these issues only further brushes these issues under the rug. Murray skewers the lack of reformist voices within mainstream Islam to address these problematic aspects inherited from its origins. This brings us to a crucial point: media representation. Radical elements garner more media attention, overshadowing the peaceful majority. This skews public perception and fuels stereotypes.
But the fact is that tonight, the organisers of this debate asked a number of clerics. None of them would show. Specifically, they wouldn't show and debate against Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Myself, I don't think they cared. But no, it's very interesting that they will not debate. Time and again, the actual leaders of your religion will not debate this. And you're left with people like we have here. The reason why is, of course, is that the leaders of the religion show such terrible lessons. The thing that worries me is that although tonight we hear from the fellow panelists here about how Islam is a religion of peace, the fact is that the people who are making the decisions in the religion, the people who are preaching the religion, the heads of that religion, people like Sheikh Qaradawi, who broadcasts anti-Semitic, the most appalling filth every week on the main networks, that is the faith that's speaking for you guys. I wish that, Zeba, you were on every week on Al Jazeera, but you're not. Qaradawi is. The problem is that Islam is an unstable component.
As Douglas rightly says, the so-called leaders of Islam are conspicuously absent whenever they're called upon to defend their religion in the public square. This piece of criticism from Douglas is often overlooked and ignored. They know their medieval ideology can't withstand serious scrutiny, so they hide behind smooth-talking apologists and cry Islamophobia to shut down debate. As Douglas argues, scrutinizing these realities is not Islamophobia, but a prerequisite to understanding the religious basis that extremist groups like ISIS exploit so effectively. The fact that many Muslims choose to ignore these elements is commendable, but does not negate their existence. This harsh, historical reality highlights how imams, scholars, and sects promoting a modernized, tolerant Islam in line with Enlightenment values have consistently faced violent opposition and stigmatization as apostates or heretics, as in the case of the Mutazilites. We'll get back to that soon. He highlights how radical clerics like Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who has advocated suicide bombings and made abhorrent anti-Semitic statements, have a wider reach and audience than reformist voices. This allows the hardline interpretations to proliferate unchecked. The Global Terrorism Index report from 2020 backs this up. It highlights that Islamic extremist groups have been responsible for the majority of terrorist attacks worldwide over the past 2 decades. The people here tonight who are saying Islam is a religion of peace, I wish they were the leaders of your religion, but they're not. Murray is essentially saying, If you truly believe Islam should be interpreted as a peaceful religion, then you need to amplify reformist voices and relegate the intolerant hardline edicts of groups like Al-Qaeda and their ideological forebears to the dustbin of history.
As a religion, an unstable component. 1,000 years ago, the Mu'tazilites tried to reform the religion. They were wiped out. The fact is that Islam is many things, many, many things. But to say it's a religion of peace is nonsense. It's to ignore reality. It's to ignore very difficult but necessary facts, not paradigms, but facts. To say that Islam is a religion of peace is to say something based entirely on hope. It's to elevate a hope into truth. And I hope, as you all know, history teaches us that's a very bad thing to do.
Bravo, Douglas Murray. In an age of obfuscation and cowardice, when it comes to Islam, he remains a fearless voice for truth. The uncomfortable facts he lays bare in this debate can no longer be brushed under the rug as inconvenient or politically incorrect. The consequences are too severe. He cites examples of would-be Muslim reformers in the past like the Mu'tazilites, who tried to incorporate reason and rationality into Islamic theology in the 9th century, only to be brutally suppressed by the religious orthodoxy. Critics often accuse Murray and others of painting Islam with too broad a brush. Many Islamic scholars and believers emphasize that the Quran's contentious verses are often taken out of context, and that Islam as a whole advocates for peace. However, Murray's arguments are supported by data from organizations like Pew Research Center, which found alarmingly high support for radical Sharia laws, apostasy punishments, and other draconian practices among Muslims in several countries. These statistics don't represent the Muslims' population as a whole, but highlight a minor yet significant strain of thought that aligns with concerns about Islam's compatibility with modern values, that Murray and others are imploring us to have an open and honest discussion about, not out of hatred, but to uproot the root causes enabling radicalization to fester. Only through open dialogue and scrutiny can we separate the metaphorical baby from the bathwater, embracing Muslims while firmly rejecting the intolerant and oppressive dogmas that still exert undue influence from Islam's darker chapters. Like the video and subscribe if you value honest dialogue over comfortable delusions.